Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Rachel and I'm a marketing coordinator here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com or by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. In the coming days, we're looking forward to welcoming Jordan Ifueko in conversation with Bethany C. Morrow. Tonight, we're honored to welcome Aiden Thomas and Adam Silvera. Born in Oakland, California, Aiden Thomas often haunted Mountain View Cemetery like a second home during their misspent youth. As a queer trans Latinx, Aiden advocates strongly for diverse representation in all media. Aiden is notorious among their friends for always being surprised by twist ending to books/movies and organizing their bookshelves by colors. When not writing, Aiden enjoys exploring the outdoors with their dog, Ronan. And their cat, Figaro, prefers to support their indoor hobbies like reading and drinking too much coffee. In Aiden Thomas's LGBT paranormal YA novel, Cemetery Boys, a trans boy determined to prove his gender to his family summons a ghost who refuses to leave. Aiden is joined in conversation by Adam Silvera, the New York Times bestselling author of Infinity Son, They Both Die at the End, More Happy Than Not, History is All You Left Me, and What If It's Us with Becky Albertalli. He was born and raised in New York and now lives in Los Angeles. He is tall for no reason. This evening's event will also include a Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. And if someone has asked a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, please consider upvoting that particular question. And most importantly, please consider supporting Aiden Thomas, Adam Silvera, and Powell's by purchasing a copy of their books. I'll be dropping links to their books in the chat throughout the evening. And without any further ado, please welcome Aiden and Adam.
Yay! We're gonna act like we hear your applause. This is your applause that you can't hear from everybody right now.
It's deafening. I love it.
Thunderous applause I'm seeing. Huge congratulations on debut day. We got to chat a little bit, but how are you feeling? How's life?
It's good. I'm so overwhelmed in like the best of ways. Yeah, just really overwhelmed. And it was funny listening to her read my bio because I had way too much caffeine today. So I'm like, and like going off the rails like already, which is great for when I'm trying to sit still in one place and like talk to you. So
right.
So it's really well.
Well, I'm so happy for you because I know originally the book was supposed to pub in June or May, and then early 2020 June. Decided to be 2020 and screwed everything up. But I'm so happy that that hasn't derailed any of the momentum behind your beautiful book. I am loving it now. I'm doing the audiobook, which I know we've spoken about, and it's so damn good. And
it's so good.
It's so beautiful. I'm loving it. So why don't we just sort of like, for those, I mean, I'm sure everyone has a basic familiarity with Cemetery Boys, but why don't you break it down for us on the inspiration behind the book and how you would describe it?
Yeah, so someone, a blogger recently called it a ghost story turned rom-com, which I think is the most perfect description I have ever heard for it. So that's absolutely correct. And it's about Yadriel, who is a trans boy in a community of brujex. And in order to try to prove his gender to his community, he decides that he's going to go out and summon the ghost of his recently deceased cousin, except he summons the wrong ghost, and it ends up being Julian Diaz, the bad boy from his school. And Julian refuses to be released to the afterlife until he finds out what happened to his friends after he was killed. And so the two of them get caught up in a crazy wild adventure and develop feelings for each other, and everything just gets astronomically complicated.
It's so good. Sorry, go on, please. I'm just like, I'm so hyped like hearing you talk about it as well.
And then the inspiration actually came from a writing prompt that I saw on Tumblr.
Oh my God.
Back when I was haunting Tumblr like really hardcore. And it was one sentence, and it was, what would happen if you summoned a ghost and you couldn't get rid of it? And I was like looking at all the like reblogs and replies of people being like, oh, here's this like really creepy idea, and like, oh, possession. And I was like, but what if it was cute? And that's basically where like the whole story idea came from. And yeah, and then it just kind of took off from there.
That's wild. I mean, like, what a gigantic genesis moment for what has become like your debut novel, like something that has literally changed your life in a lot of ways. It was just a Tumblr.
Yeah, like literally a blip on my screen.
God. Well, so how tricky was it to sort of develop the palpable chemistry between Yadriel and Julian? Like, I mean, how do you navigate, hi, I'm a living person and I don't know, I kind of want to like make out with like the spirit. Like, how does that play out? Like, what questions do you find yourself asking yourself to sort of like get there?
So when I was like, okay, this is going to be like a paranormal romance, how do you make this happen? Because usually when I'm writing, physicality is really important to me. But then also there was kind of like a purpose to having the love interest be a ghost. And isolation is like such a killer within the queer community. And it's really important to find like connections to keep you afloat, like when you feel really alone. And I wanted to kind of mirror that experience in Cemetery Boys. So you have Julian, who is a ghost, who's someone that Yads like literally can't touch. And he's one of the first people to unquestioningly accept and affirm Yads' gender. And I really wanted to set up that juxtaposition to his family, who is like physically and literally like right there, but who keep failing him. And kind of when you're queer, especially when you're in the closet and you feel really alone, you make these connections to people like through the internet, through bloggers or through YouTubers, or like through characters and books. And so I kind of really wanted to like replicate that within their romance. Like they feel so connected and they understand each other in this really like unique and powerful way, but they can't touch each other.
Yeah. God, that moment where you talk about Julian accepting Yadriel, like I remember when it reached that point in the book, I got so nervous. Like I was expecting like a potentially like shitty comment from Julian, and he's pretty much like, yeah, okay, cool, yeah, no, actually that tracks, yeah, that makes sense, cool, and then accepts it. And you know, it's one of my favorite parts about the concept of the book alone too. You know, it's just made all the more special and empowering because of, you know, Yadriel's like narrative there. And so yeah, completely obsessed with that moment that you described. And I like want to talk about more, but I'm gonna like shut up so people can like enjoy it. There's a lot of obviously like full Latinx cast, which I'm obsessed with. Like I am a Puerto Rican who like didn't get to see a lot of that growing up, especially like in a queer space. So like the intersection right there is fantastic. And as I'm reading it right now, I'm like, okay, like why didn't you publish this 15 years ago?
Right.
When I was at that age, and so grateful for it today, and so grateful for all the generations of teens who are going to have it from this point moving forward. Did you find yourself sort of wanting to like hold back on cultural details? Because I feel like we have a lot of like white gatekeepers who are a little bit like, are people going to understand that? Like how do you sort of like balance how much you want to share so that it's like authentic and true to your culture, while also trying to like, are you trying to write a story for like the masses, or what was your approach there?
Yeah, it's really interesting because when I was pitching Cemetery Boys to my editor, I had like 5 projects, and it was the last one that I talked about in the email, and it was a paragraph, and most of the sentences ended in question marks. Like it was literally me going to my editor and being like, oh, like maybe he's trans, and like maybe he's Latinx, and like it's a bunch of brujeria. And it was like, it took me a while to realize that I was asking for permission to basically write about someone who is within my identity, who's queer, trans, and Latinx. And I didn't notice it at the time. So talking about like the gatekeeping, that was really interesting. And I kind of assumed that that wasn't a story that anyone would want, or that was marketable, or that, you know, we were like allowed to write, right? And so it was shocking and incredible to me when my editor emailed back and was like, that's the story that I want. That's the one. That's like, yes, Aiden, go write it. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was it was exciting, and it was unexpected, and kind of every turn of the way, it's been me second guessing myself and my publishing and editorial team being like, no, Aiden, like you can do that. This is, yes, like do that. Like at one point I was like, do I still have to use italics when I write in Spanish? Because I don't really want to. And my editor was like, Aiden, you don't have to do that.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I like posted it on Twitter and she DMs me. She's like, Aiden, you don't have to use italics. And I was like, oh, okay. Just like getting paranoid. So it took a while to kind of feel confident about it, right? But then as soon as I was like, okay, this is what we're doing, I just leaned so hard into it. Like there's no italics. I don't translate any of the Spanish, which turned into like a fun craft exercise of like making sure you're giving enough context clues.
Sure.
But yeah, I was just like, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it hard. So let's do it. And I don't think I really came at it as like I'm writing it for this specific group. Like clearly, like I'm definitely caring most about like trans Latinx folks, but I feel like it's a story that where Latinx people can feel connected to the story, and it's one that can ease non-Latinx people kind of into the culture and like what we're all about. So I think there's like, you know, an in-between space that I kind of navigated through.
And you do it so successfully. And it really is this thing too, where it's like, how many times do you not know a word in a book and like an English word and you just kind of skip over that shit and you're like, oh, well, I either figured it out or didn't. Or some people will actually, like maniacs, will stop and Google like what the word is. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of reading. I don't have time to be like doing these like Google detours too, but it's
so many people where they're like, yeah, I had like my phone out and like I had the book and then I was like Googling it and translating it, which I think is like so sweet.
It's amazing. Like I don't have the patience for that. Like, but it's this thing too, where it's like, if I don't understand something, I have my resources to be able to figure that out. And if I don't, like, that's not reflective of the author. Like I get so infuriated when I see reviews that are like, oh, well, they didn't like break this down for me. And I'm like, bro, like
you can figure it out.
Figure it out. Yeah, it's fun. And you know, everything that you're speaking to about sort of the insecurities that you had and writing about yourself, you know, like that of course is the result of not seeing yourself, so many different important elements about yourself in fiction prior to that, you know. Like I mean, this book is just such a triple threat in so many ways for people, and it's so special. And I love seeing it in genre fiction as well, right? Like I mean, we talk about, especially in queer spaces, how we aren't only coming out stories, you know. We also want to like wear the crown, we want to like slay the dragon, do all this stuff, and we have that with Yadriel, and it's so beautiful. And like I'm curious too, are there any other like genres that you find yourself sort of like attracted to?
Oh my gosh, Adam, I want to write in every genre. Like I have interest in like everything. Like I have ideas for like contemporary rom-coms and more fantasy, and I'm super into sci-fi. I'm like, what about a queer Titanic story? And like historical stuff. Like there's
a queer Titanic story?
Yeah, like in space.
I'm seeing in the comments too, people are like, queer Titanic.
Yes.
Is that one of the ideas that you had pitched to your editor?
No, that's a more recent development when I was watching Titanic and having a lot of feelings.
Yeah. Okay, we need to talk more about this like queer Titanic thing. People are saying from the iceberg's perspective, ghost Titanic. People have ideas. Steer clear. People want to see it in space. I'm seeing a lot of comments right now.
I love it.
But okay, so then is there a genre then that you think you won't touch? Like me personally, I'm like, I am not about that historical life. That shit's behind me. I can't touch it. I don't know how to do it. Is there one that you feel like you would be, or especially daunting to you?
I mean, historical is definitely daunting, and especially because when it comes to historical fiction, my interest lies within Latinx experiences, and thanks to colonization, we don't have like access to that research, and kind of there's not a lot of written text, right? So it's really difficult to kind of do the research that's required for historical fiction. but in the same vein, like, I think the closest idea that I have for like historical fiction is this Maya myth that I'm obsessed with, and I'm like, I would love to do like a kind of like the Song of Achilles type retelling of it.
Okay.
But again, yeah. But
oh my god, I just remember how much you have hyped up Song of Achilles.
Yeah, God, I'm obsessed.
I think you're especially obsessed with the audiobook, right? I feel like you were pushing the audio.
The book is so stunning. Yes,
okay.
It's just, I love, and Madeline Miller is like such a treasure. I actually met her in person at Powell's. And I have a Song of Achilles tattoo on my arm.
That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah. So I was like really nervous, and I was like, I like your book a lot. Like, it means a lot to me. I was like, you have this tattoo? I felt like a total nerd. But she was like so sweet. And she's like, oh my God, I love it. Can I take a picture? And I was just like, yeah, trying to like not cry.
Oh my God. And I'm sure you'll be seeing Cemetery Boys tattoos in no time.
I'm already dying over the fan art. Like, every time I see fan art, my heart stops. Like, it's...
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's truly impressive. Like, it's all been so gorgeous. And I just, God, I love just seeing them. And it's the kind of, I've been seeing so much of it that I'm like, surprised the book's not out yet. Because it's so much support for it. And I think it's such a testament to the story. And speaking of, so I think it's really interesting because I think I read a few weeks ago or something that Cemetery Boys wasn't supposed to be your debut, right? Like, you had written Lost in the Neverwoods, which is coming out in 2021. What? What happened?
So it's, again, really interesting because we're kind of going back to like this subject of like gatekeepers and what we feel like we are allowed to write and like what is marketable. Lost in the Neverwoods was the first book that I sold, and it was my thesis in grad school. And it is a dark fantasy reimagining of the original Peter Pan canon. And I love that book. That book holds like a huge part of my heart in it, and kind of my personal emotional experiences kind of traveling through life. And we went through the whole process, got it to copy edits. And again, I started bugging my editor, being like, when can we talk about option books? Because I have ideas. And that's when I pitched Cemetery Boys, and she loved it so much. And I quick drafted the first draft in 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Sent it to her. I know, it was an experience. And then she read it, and she was like, you know, we've been thinking, and we feel like that Cemetery Boys is really like the book that like represents you, and like that this could be the perfect debut novel for you. And I was like, yeah, I love that idea. Let's do it. So yeah, it was a weird roundabout way. So Lost in the Neverwoods has been ready for forever. And I can't wait for it to finally get pubbed.
And when is it? It's spring of 2021?
It's March 23rd in 21. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So 6 months or something, right? Oh, math is hard.
Cool. Okay, so we both have March books, which means that we get to do this again.
Yes. Excellent.
That's so awesome. Like, I can't imagine getting ready to sort of like release a book thinking like, like in a lot of ways it feels like for me More Happy Than Not, which was my debut, and then if I'd written Infinity Sun, which I always wanted to write fantasy, if all of a sudden they're like, hey, let's put Infinity Sun out first, like I don't even know how I would have reacted. I'm so happy that your reaction is like, hell yeah, let's go for it. And I do agree. It's funny, like it doesn't feel like a book that was drafted in 6 weeks, but also like I don't know the full timeline, but yeah, I love that story so much, and it does feel like an appropriate debut for you. Can you okay, so I have a bit of a like fun question, and I'm seeing that we have like a ton of questions, so we might like get into that a little sooner. If you could perform the Brujex ritual and bring back a dead literary character, who would it be?
I mean,
someone that would make you happy to like bring back.
Oh God, that's so difficult. That is so difficult. And like, I mean, I just want to talk to Patroclus, and I want to tell him how much I love him and how he's a good, sweet, precious boy. Like, I'm trying to think if that's like the big one, right? Because that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's not a spoiler because it's the Achilles myth.
Right.
But yeah, especially like from the Song of Achilles, he's just kind of like such this sweet, kind, like person that I just would want to like hug him and like pet him and tell him that he's loved. You know what I mean?
Okay, I accept that. And now just to like, now put a twist.
Okay.
Which literary character dead that would pop up, who would absolutely infuriate you if they reappeared? You're just like, no, stay dead. Get out of my face.
Oh gosh.
You're amongst friends here.
I know. It's like, oh well. That's hard. I'm like trying to look at all of my bajillion books that I have and think about it. You know, now that honestly, Captain Hook would kind of piss me off. I know he like officially didn't like technically die, but that guy is such like just the worst. Like, you know what I mean? So I think I'd be pretty mad if I was like in Julian's position and I was like trying to summon Patroclus and freaking Captain Hook showed up. I would be livid. Like, I would be so upset.
Both these answers are so aggressively on brand for you. Like, from conversations that we have had like in this very chat, you know, we have like Song of Achilles, we have Neverland, like just you're true to form. It's fantastic. And let me peek at these questions. Okay. This is from Maggie. What do you hope for the future of queer YA publishing? What would you like to see more of? What would you like to change? Answer what you feel comfortable with there.
That's such a good question. I want just more in general, you know what I mean? Especially across genres. When I was writing Cemetery Boys, or like coming up with the plot, I guess, like I wanted it's a story about a trans character, but it's not really about his transness. He's a trans character, he's a main character in a fantasy novel that happens to be trans. And that's what I really want more of. I want more like thrillers and mysteries and fantasies where the trans character or the queer character is queer, but it's not like the most interesting thing about them. It's just happens to be part of who they are. It's not necessarily like, you know, what the entire plot is about, which isn't to say that those problem novels or coming out stories aren't important, because they absolutely are. They're critical, I would even say. But I just want more. I want queerness like normalized. I want it to be something that that people don't even blink at when they come across it in like a genre book. That's what I want.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because I think that sometimes gets lost in these conversations where people are like, oh, we've had enough like coming out stories. It's like, no, we haven't. We've had a lot of like cis gay white coming out stories too, you know, but regardless, like those are always going to be valuable to someone because America is like so, oh my God, the complete opposite of utopia. And it's just, those stories is always going to matter for someone, you know? So it's not our place to try to like knock that down for someone, but we do deserve to see ourselves in other lights. And Cemetery Boys does that. Like I love getting to sort of breathe in Yadriel's like transness as it's appropriate to the story. And as, you know, a lot of it is just sort of like day-to-day stuff. Like, oh, all right, I'm like taking up my binder. I don't want Julian to see me without my binder. And I'm like sneaking on my covers. And it's like, I get to take in that detail, absorb it, really digest what that means, while also they continue their conversation about, am I bringing you to school with me tomorrow? You're kind of a ghost. Like, and all these different things. And it all blends, like you know, and it's all important and key. And I think you do that so accessibly and perfectly. And so well done. All right, so another great question. Okay, when can we expect a Cemetery Boys sequel, parentheses, Two Cemetery, Two Boys? That is from Alex Abraham.
I love that. Incredible title. Yes, like let's do that. I don't know. It's so funny because when I was writing this book, especially the first draft, there was so much that I wanted to talk about and I wanted to explore and I wanted to unpack. And my editor was like, Aiden, you're trying to do a lot of things and we only have like 350 pages. And I was like, you know, that's fair. So there's an encyclopedia of Cemetery Boys like knowledge in my brain. So there's definitely more stories to be told, especially with Yads, Jules, and Maritza. I mean, they're my golden trio, so any further story would have them front and center. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much more that I want to play with, especially Julian and kind of what he looks like on the other side of this adventure.
Of this book, which we won't spoil.
No. So there's definitely a lot of ideas. We'll see what happens.
And if you guys want another Cemetery Boys sequel, you have to buy Cemetery Boys.
That's right. Let them know that you
push it on your friends. It is word of mouth, people. Like, really, you recommend the book to one friend, they love it, they recommend it to two, and then it just goes onward and onward and onward, and then all of a sudden we have like 10 Cemetery Boys books. So just as big as the Fast and Furious franchise. So
I can only dream.
This is from Kayla. Do you remember what music or movies helped inspire Cemetery Boys, if any at all?
Yeah, so I make playlists for my characters and my books. So that was really helpful when it came to writing it. And it's really, like, the playlists are such hot messes because Jules and Yads are so different, like, intrinsically as characters. So all of Yadriel's songs are like sleepy kind of dream pop with like Troye Sivan and like Khalid. And then you have like friggin' Julian's songs, which are like really shitty reggaeton that's like bum, 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 bum. So I'd be like, so if I ever like shuffled the playlist, it'd be like boom, 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 boom. I'd be like, okay, this is
like fall asleep.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms
people want you to drop the playlist, so if it's not on Spotify or somewhere,
such a mess. There's like 62 songs on that playlist.
Oh my god!
And I know, it's insane. There is one song in particular, East Side by Benny Blanco, Halsey, and Khalid, and that is actually, if you listen to that song, it's basically 3 whole chapters of the book. Like, you can almost like listen to it and go through it verbatim. So highly recommend that after you read the book.
Yeah.
And then for movies and media, on my block on Netflix, which oh my gosh, I love that show so much. The kind of chaotic teenager angst that's in that was very Julian. I love that show. And what movies? I mean, Casper, kind of, like, obviously.
Oh my god, yeah.
And then Road to El Dorado and Coco. Yeah, and then like Road to El Dorado and Coco were kind of like the aesthetic inspirations.
Oh my god, I have to tell Becky Albertalli about the Casper thing. Becky's like such a huge Casper fan.
Oh my god, it's so good. I have so many feelings.
Oh my god. Well, you're a hero because I get asked a lot about like, oh, what playlist do you have for like your books? I'm like, I don't know, whatever like I'm in the mood for. like I'm writing a lot of like Infinity Reaper to Black is King, and I'm not sure how many connections people are going to see between the two, but like it's just whatever I'm in the mood for. We have a really important question from Yadriel, I believe. How do you get your eyebrows so perfect?
Well, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
Actually,
this is hard-hitting stuff right here.
No, it's really important. For quarantine, I really had to like learn how to like groom and like upkeep my own stuff. So I've actually learned how to wax my own eyebrows. So I am just exceptionally hairy, and then so it's really just like a taking away like practice that kind of gets them to where they are.
I feel like we need like a YouTube tutorial or something, or like an Instagram reel sort of deal.
It would be a lot of me burning myself, swearing, and then being like, "Oh man, did I fuck it up?" Shit.
Love it. This is viral shit right here. Like this is how people go viral. So, Aiden, we have books to push. Go viral. Do whatever you do. Guerrilla marketing. Let's go.
I'll figure it out.
Okay. Jade Driscoll wants to know, what was your writing process like for Cemetery Boys, and did it differ at all from Lost in the Neverwoods? And I know you spoke a lot about how Cemetery Boys is giving you permission to write more authentically yourself and everything, but were there like structural differences, or anything else that comes to mind? Totally.
So when I wrote Lost in the Neverwoods, I wrote that over like 2.5 years while I was in school. So very slow and kind of leisurely. And then like, you know, the crunch for the last week of grad school before I graduated to be like, oh shit, I have to actually finish my draft.
Homework.
And then I edited it myself over like 2.5 years. So again, like really slow and leisurely. It was up on Wattpad for a little while and it got some traction there before I submitted it to students. Yeah, it's so funny. And then meanwhile, you have Cemetery Boys where I had 6 weeks to write it. So the processes were entirely different. And I am a hardcore plotter. I don't understand how pantsers get anything done. It would take me like 10 years to write a book if I just pantsed it. My outlines, like my friends make fun of me because the outline for Cemetery Boys capped out at 72 pages. Like that's
for the outline.
For the outline, for like the bullet pointed outline. Because I would literally, I know, but like there's a method to the like process because since I knew everything and every scene and every beat that was happening, I could write it in 6 weeks. Right. If I hadn't done that, then it would have been impossible. But now
that's so fascinating to me because I outline too. I outline in Scrivener, especially for like the Infinity books because it's big world, blah blah. But like, what I often find myself struggling with is that I don't understand the emotional journeys as well until I'm like actually writing. So do you feel like you have a good sense on your character's emotional beats while like in your like super 72-page outline? I'm sure surprises happen, but like are you outlining emotions as well?
Yeah, so I'm outlining everything. I am obsessed with Jessica Brody's book, Save the Cat Writes a Novel.
Right,
and and it literally breaks down all of those emotional beats for you. So having that guide and being like, okay, well, I know that this needs to happen at this point. So like the kind of foundation for it is there, but the like real emotionality and the real kind of like love and tenderness that goes into the story, like that's something that was incorporated during rounds of edits. So I'm sure the first draft was like my editorial team is very nice and they're like, oh, this is like one of the cleanest like rough drafts we've ever seen. I was like, oh, okay. But it was definitely like a process of kind of, that's what's so nice about having an editorial team. It's like they help you like point out where the story still needs work, because I don't think I could figure that out on my own. I'm not very smart. I am a little clever. That's about it. So yeah, that really important, the like emotional resonance is really for me the biggest part of editing and revising.
Love it. Okay, quick question. Do you watch Avatar: Last Airbender? Are you a fan?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Because Christian Vega wants to know which elements would the characters bend if they could?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I think Yadriel is pretty easy. He'd be an earthbender just because he's very kind of solid in all of his movements. He really tries to think about what he does before he does it, even though he's one of those characters where he really tries to do his best, but then just kind of messes things up around the way. But I think that like really down to earth and kind of grounded person would be Yads, and he would definitely be an earthbender. Maritza would definitely be a firebender.
Yes.
She is so powerful and is such a force of nature, like within herself, that like I want
She's
to
got
say,
that
like,
Azula lightning.
I mean, that's literally
sure.
what I was gonna say. Like Azula tendencies without the like mass murder part.
Right.
And then I'm pretty sure Yads would be not Yads. Jules would be a airbender, so kind of airy, let's say, but then like in constant motion and movement and kind of several times I refer to him as kind of as a thunderstorm, and so that kind of
I love that.
Gusts of wind energy is definitely Julian. Yeah.
Robin Gomez is saying that they need art of all this, and I agree.
Yes, people who are good at drawing.
Yeah, if someone wants to give Aiden a Cemetery Boys gift, commission some art of this very thing, please. Vanessa Diaz wants to know if you grew up celebrating Dia de los Muertos, or did you develop an interest in Day of the Dead rituals like later on in life?
It was definitely later on in life. I grew up in Oakland, California, so super diverse, a huge Latinx community. But when I was younger, my family survived immigration by assimilation. So kind of rediscovering my identity and like who I am is something that happened later in life. And Dia de Muertos is, oh my gosh, it's my favorite holiday of the year. And it's really one that helps me feel connected to my family and to my ancestors who I didn't get to know on a personal level. Yeah, gosh, Dia de Muertos means like the world to me. It's like, it's very precious. Like I love Christmas. Christmas is great, but Dia de Muertos is my heart.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Sarah wants to know, Sarah says, most books I've read have a standout quote. Do you have a quote from Cemetery Boys that is your favorite?
Oh, that's so hard.
You don't have to remember it line by line, obviously. Is there a quote in essence that you feel like you come back to, or that you've seen readers gravitate to so far?
Yes. So a lot of them are spoilery. So there's probably one that's the most that I'm not going to say. But cool. I think one that like when people are like, well, what quote should we use for this? It's when Julian turns to Yadriel and he says, are you ready? And Yad says, no. And Julian says, do it anyways. And I think that's a really good
good.
Yeah, a good theme, and like it speaks a lot to the story in and of itself.
That's gorgeous. And it's so funny, right? Because I feel like so often people are like, oh, this is my favorite quote because it just waxed poetically for 10 minutes. And it was like, it ran on for 4 sentences. And oh my God, I'm going to go embroider a pillow with it. And it's like, but sometimes like the ones that really just don't require, like, I mean, that was like under 10 words, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's so powerful. And I'm seeing everyone in the comments like having the same sort of like chest bump that like I'm feeling right now. So I have a question right here from Jamison. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, mispronounced. How did you approach writing Julian, especially the idea of him as a bad boy?
Oh, that is such a good question.
It is.
Yeah, so for Julian, like I said, I wanted to unpack so much kind of societal issues when I wrote this book. That one of them was in society and in school, there is this perpetuation that kids who can't sit still in a classroom and learn for 8 hours a day, or for whatever reason, not smart, or are thought of as problem kids, right? And it's simply because their learning style doesn't match up with how traditional classes are taught. And so I really wanted to have a character where he's had this bad boy label, like simply because he has ADHD. He can't sit still. He's full of energy. He's impulsive. And he's not malicious by any means. So it's really people at school and who like are observing his behavior and seeing it as acting out, when it's really just like he can't sit still. Like,
right.
So for me, that was really important, talking about how quickly kids like that get labeled as bad, and disproportionately it's boys, and disproportionately it's boys of color, especially Black boys. So I wanted to like address that and kind of have that shake up Yadz's expectations when, you know, first he sees that he's someone who's goes, he's like, oh Lord. But then he gets to know him and he's like, this isn't a bad guy. He's just misunderstood, or like, you know, just kind of written off, honestly, is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. And it's, I mean, it's the dimension that we need, right? To sort of like, just fill those characters out. And again, I feel like I've said this 1,000 times, but it's like you do that so beautifully, and everyone agrees. We have a question from Pandela. For both of you, how do you get over feelings of not being Latinx enough to write your stories? Are there doubts of not being connected to your culture? I'm not sure. I know that's definitely a way that I feel, but I can't speak.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. That's kind of hard, right? In this kind of aspect of like, well, let me restart that sentence. It is hard.
Yeah.
And it's tricky, especially when you have multiple marginalizations kind of to work with. I found personally that, I mean, I'm queer, I'm trans, I'm Latinx. And a lot of those groups don't get along with each other or respect one another. And kind of being a part of so many communities actually makes me feel like I'm part of no community. And being Latinx is a big one. I wasn't raised speaking Spanish. Again, like I said, my family used assimilation in order to survive. And I think that that's really hard. And it makes you second guess yourself. And it's super othering and it's hard to work through. But kind of with writing this book, it was really a love letter to the Latinx community. Like I wanted to celebrate and wax poetic about what I love so much about our culture. That Cemetery Boys was a huge way for me to reconnect to people. I'm usually so scared to enter any kind of like group, like even on Twitter, right? Like you have the Latinx bloggers and you have the queer bloggers. I felt like I couldn't kind of enter any of those spaces because I didn't, even though I technically belonged to all of them, I didn't fit in well with any of them. So being able to write Cemetery Boys, it was like, this is what I love about us. And this is really important to me. And this is how I feel seen and connected. But this is like Yad's experiences also reflect how I feel outside of those communities a lot of the time.
Yeah. God, it's so, I mean, I'm so happy that this question was asked because it's definitely something I've been feeling. And, you know, like reading your book, like there's this kind of ache in me where I'm like, oh man, you know, because my mom, it's like where I'm Puerto Rican from my mom's side of the family. And like reading about Lita reminds me of my Lita who passed like a couple weeks after I sold my first book, and how she didn't get to see me talk about my Litas throughout all my various books and everything. And then just like coming across language and stuff that I don't, or even like cultural markers that I don't recognize in my books. Because I'm like, I wasn't raised with my mom speaking Spanish around the house. And it's funny, like my mom and all my DPs, like they all speak Spanish, but none of their kids do. Like they didn't teach any of us. So me and my cousins were all like, none of us speak Spanish. And like, apart from like a couple of my white cousins who learned Spanish from just like being overseas and everything. But like I have spent 3 hours of my life in Puerto Rico. And that was like during a quick break in a cruise. But I have really struggled with like feeling Puerto Rican enough. Like I'm white passing. My last name is Spanish. It's not Hispanic. And it's, you know, I was supposed to be a contributor to a Latinx anthology and, you know, it's like nonfiction as well. And I bowed out, like, even after it was announced, because I'm like, I don't feel like I deserve this spot. Like, I'm like, I feel like you should go find someone else who is maybe more engaged with that side. And it sucks because like, I'm Puerto Rican. Like that. And just because I don't meet certain markers or whatever, like doesn't erase that from me, you know? And but it's a struggle. And I look at the way I write my books and at the way I write my Hispanic characters, and it looks so different from what I'm reading in Cemetery Boys. And it's I'm in awe of your work, and I'm looking at it really enviously because I'm like, oh man, I wish I were as connected as you are with your work. So it's
it's hard. And also a really important thing that my sister talks to me about all the time is like, when you're white passing, that comes with a level of responsibility to be using your voice and to be like you said, maybe stepping back to let others step forward, but also bringing people along with you. I've said a few times in interviews that like getting into publishing and kind of having this really unexpected platform, I feel like I am like wedging my elbow into the door and then trying to sneak as many people in with me as I possibly can. Like that's like my whole goal, like having this platform is like, okay, I need to be using this for good. I need to be using my voice to bring others with me, to uplift others. And that is so, so important. And like another thing is being that I get asked about a lot is people are so in love with Maritza, which I completely understand.
Yep.
And they're like, we want a Maritza book. But Maritza is Afro-Latinx. It is absolutely not my place to be writing a book with a perspective character who is Afro-Latinx. I have no idea about what those experiences are like. I can't write about it. And it's not my place at all. So I would never want to like essentially make money off of that really hyper marginalized experience. If it could be like an IP thing that I could give to an Afro-Latinx writer, I would love to do that. Like that would be incredible. I don't know if my publisher would be happy about it, but
just collab with someone, do like a dual narrative like novel. You write Yadriel, they write Maritza, and like boom,
something like that. Yeah. So I try to take that responsibility very seriously.
Cool. On a easier note, or I mean, we'll see. Craig wants to know which writing advice makes you crazy?
Oh gosh. I'm trying to think.
And if you don't
There's
have
a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's just like, what? That's a really hard question. I'm trying to think.
We can move on. You can tweet out an answer later if you have more time to think about it.
Let me ruminate on that one.
Okay, cool.
I tend to just ignore all the bad advice that I hear.
Which is great, right? And you know, like writing is so instinctive. You have a sense of if it's going to click with you or not, and it's worth exploring. And okay. I feel like I'm not sure how easy this is going to be. Robin wants to know, what are your top 5 books of all time? Or one that really got you into writing in the first place?
Okay, I think I can answer this question. We already talked about Song of Achilles.
Yes.
That's like the most beautifully written book. If I could get anywhere near the poetic prose that Madeline Miller uses, that would be incredible. But she takes 10 years to write her books, which is why they're so beautiful.
Oh my God.
She's like, I can talk about her all day. Another huge one who I talk about a lot is Zoraida Cordova and the Brooklyn Bruja series. And today, the final book in the series is out. Is it within reach? Yes, it is. What? Wayward Witch. So, reading this series, or specifically Labyrinth Lost, that was the first time where I was like, oh, we can write stories about Latinx culture and like brujeria. Like I had no idea. I didn't think that we were. Yeah, right. I didn't think that we were allowed to. And reading about Alex like changed my life.
Yeah.
So I always feel like really kind of nerdy whenever I'm interacting with Zoraida, because I'm just like, Aiden, you got to be cool. Like we're supposed to be like on the same level, but at the same time, I'm just like, oh my God. So that one was super life-changing for me. Oh God, 5 books. Let me think.
You don't have to do 5. And also, I know that you've been recommending like Marco Shiro online.
Yes.
You have been pushing
Legendborn, which is coming out soon.
Yes. Like next
Adam
week, maybe.
Sass, Surrender Your Sons is coming out, and that's like I haven't cried in 5 years, Adam. 5 years. And
I wanted to ask you about that. I'm like, what? I cried twice a week.
I sobbed my way through that epilogue. It's like, oh my gosh. I was like good for like the first 2/3, and then that last 1/3, I was like, oh God. I was like, oh no, I can feel the feelings. And then the epilogue happened, and I was just a sobbing mess at 1:30 in the morning. And I like messaged Adam, and I was like, this is so beautiful.
Oh my God. And it was an epilogue that did it?
It was the epilogue. It was bad.
Oh,
so I highly recommend that one.
In
terms of like newer stuff that's coming out. Yeah, I had a lot of feelings.
I'm gonna see if I can sneak in one more question.
Okay.
I'm scrolling through, so I'm gonna just keep making nonsense sounds and sentences until I can decide on one, so there's no awkward silences. All right. From Galadriel, they're saying, I'm non-binary and a writer, and you are honestly my hero right now. What advice do you have for up-and-coming writers?
That's a really good question. I will do 2. I will do one that's not helpful, because everyone's going to be like, Aiden, and one that's like a little bit more helpful. So the unhelpful one is that you need to finish your first draft.
Aiden.
I know, but I feel like I get I have friends and I know writers when they're like, what's like a good piece of like writing advice? And I'm like, well, here's some like suggestions for like revision and how to like make your plot more depth, and like pitch competitions are really, really useful. And they're like, oh yeah, but I haven't finished writing my book. And I'm like, well, friend, you can't publish your book without writing the first draft of it. You can't make it better without writing the first draft. So write the first draft. It can be shitty. It's gonna be shitty. It's not gonna be
It's
pretty.
going to be, yeah.
It's going to be a dumpster fire. And that's okay, because when you do revisions, you'll make it so much prettier. But in order to get anywhere, you have to write it.
And also, really, like, something to remember there, everyone is like, no one has to see your first draft. You do not have to share with any friends. A lot of pressure comes thinking like, oh, I want this to feel polished. You're comparing your work to like published books that have been through the process and everything. Let it be for yourself.
Yes.
Go on,
I
Aiden,
totally agree. No, more of my like chaos, like aside from like my obscenely long plot outlines, is that when I write my first draft, I actually have a friend of mine read it as I'm writing it.
Oh my God, you are the worst.
I know, and it sounds like torture, right? But for me, she's like a cheerleader for the process. And so when I'm like, I don't want to write the next chapter, I want to go play video games, and I want to go do literally anything else but write. But I'm like, I have to keep writing because Anna's going to read it, and she's going to like this one scene in this next chapter, so I have to get it done.
Hype person.
That's my brand of chaos. But the slightly more helpful advice that I have is if you're struggling to finish a book, which is almost counterintuitive to my first advice, it's okay to step away and like work on something else. Like change your mind, work on nothing, even if it's that. But I feel like if you've been working on a book for like a year and you're still kind of struggling with it, like give yourself a break. Like don't force yourself to like get through it and then you end up hating the book, and then when you have a rough draft you're like, I never want to look at this again. It's okay to like take time and kind of to like let it ruminate, and you never know when you'll be out walking somewhere or watching a movie and then all of a sudden you're hit with like some really good inspiration, or you hear a song and you're like, okay, now I'm ready to really dive back into this full throttle. But kind of giving yourself that grace is really important.
Beautifully said. No, truly, because it is so important. And, you know, I mean, there's times I'm watching things that are so unrelated to like what I'm doing, and major breakthrough. Like it's wild when you can like trace those moments back, but giving yourself grace. I don't feel like I hear that enough. I feel like we're always like, yeah, just go take a shower, go watch a movie or whatever. But like giving yourself grace, like that is such a beautifully active thing that I think, especially in 2020 during the pandemic, like we need to be better about giving ourselves grace.
Yeah, right. It's more than just like being like, okay, well, I get to take a bath tonight. Like it's like let yourself just exist and not be at peak performance, or not expecting you to be at that level, because you'll just burn yourself out.
Yeah. I think Powell's about to hop back on, but I just want to thank you for such incredible answers and insights, and for just being so honest with us, for giving us grace. People, don't forget, readers, support Cemetery Boys so we can get 2 Cemetery 2 Boys. Commission Avatar Last Airbender fan art for Aiden to congratulate them on their release. And Aiden, you're going to drop your Spotify playlist on the book. Songs. And then we're going to be looking forward to Lost in the Neverwood next year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Adam. This has been an absolute joy. So this is wonderful.
We'll do it again in March.
Yes, I'm so ready.
Well, thank you for joining us for tonight's event. Aiden, congratulations on such a wonderful, necessary book. It was a pleasure to host the two of you and welcome everyone in the audience from all over the world. Please consider purchasing a copy of Cemetery Boys by visiting us at powells.com. We look forward to seeing you at another one of our events again soon. Take care until then.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.